and we're grateful for everyone's participation and presence this morning. Should be a really enlightening conversation. The Adult Ed Committee, as they decide on their come up with ideas for these forums, have been encouraged and challenged to consider connecting points to the broader themes of every Sunday. And those themes are primarily defined around the narrative lectionary that we're using, and or sometimes how we package them together within a series, a worship series, something along those lines. This week is an interesting moment. Here we are at the tail end of the Christmas season, this time where we've been for 6 weeks now. We've been making room for a variety of things. Ultimately, we're making room to find Christ in the world, and this is our Christmas theme. And the narrative lectionary finishes this day. For those of you who've watched worship today, you're well aware that it's a story of Jesus as a young boy. One of the only stories we have of Jesus, about Jesus as not an infant or an adult, but somewhere in between. The tween-age Jesus, and his being discovered in the temple, being learning and listening and sharing and arguably even teaching those older than him, and this sense of the importance of the place of church in the formation of young people, and so we think about the role of education in shaping and forming life, and so anyways, and so that's what led to this wondering about education. In the fall, we did a forum on healthcare. Kind of getting an update from Dr. Renee Critchlow about how healthcare is being, the healthcare systems, the public health response to COVID, all that kind of stuff. It was a fascinating day. We thought we'd take a similar approach with education today, and we are blessed. And so I don't want to take too much of the stuff away from Scott here, but this is how we got into today. So Scott, we are recording today, and go for it.
Actually, Susan is leading.
Oh, Susan, sorry. I had Scott on my brain because I mentioned you earlier.
Yep.
Susan Hurlbutt, let's see, where are you? Oh, your mic's still, okay. There you are.
Okay, thank you. And we've got 5 panelists today, and what we thought about this whole process is that, we still are in the middle of all of these changes. So we probably won't even know exactly what teaching and learning will look like, or what we've been through until this is over. But we just thought we really want to empathize and understand what the teachers are going through, what their families are going through, what the students are going through, and how we can support them, and how this is changing learning possibly for a long time. So our panel is from our church, Barb Burkhart, who's a parent educator for St. Paul ECFE, and Kelly Klecker, who is also part of Prince of Peace. She's a teacher at Osseo Senior High, and this is her 22nd year. Tony Swim is an English language teacher at Mounds View School and Kindergarten. And Amy Jola is a behavior intervention specialist and an SPED teacher in Anoka Hennepin Schools. And Jenna Sethi is the adjunct faculty for youth studies at the U of M in Qualitative Research Scientist Search Institute. So we welcome all of them. So Scott, do you want to handle the questions, or do you want me to? What would be easier?
Oh, you go ahead, and if I'll kind of look at the chat, and if I have a follow-up question, I can add it.
Okay. Well, the first question is if you could just quickly introduce yourself and what you do, and maybe just a few words how COVID has affected your job and what you're doing right now. That might be too big of a question to start out with, but Kelly, do you want to start? Oh, you're muted.
Sure. Yep. Hi. So yes, I'm Kelly Skari-Klecker, and as was mentioned, this is my 22nd year teaching math at Osseo Senior High School. So I'm a high school math teacher. I teach mainly algebra and geometry. And COVID, well, it's affected everything when it comes to teaching and learning, and it's been a huge shift. I actually, really quickly, I didn't have the experience a lot of teachers had in the spring, where they had these 3 months to kind of, those 3 months to kind of get a handle on things, because I was in a different role for the past 3 years. I was like a teacher coach, so I was working with other teachers, and so I wasn't with students in the spring, and I was like, "Ooh, I'm glad I'm not with students. This would be hard." And sure enough, I got back this fall, and it's been, I would say, probably the most challenging year of my 22-year career. So it affects everything, and it's challenging. So
Thank you. Barb, how about you? Barb Burkhardt?
I'm a parent educator with the St. Paul Public Schools ECFE program, Early Childhood Family Ed. Been doing that in St. Paul. This is my 4th year. I would say overall, COVID has made me feel like a first-year teacher again. So just having to relearn things and not be frustrated with that.
Thank you. Amy, do you want to go next? And full disclosure, Amy is my daughter.
Hi there, I'm Amy Jula. I'm with Anoka Hennepin Schools, and right now I am actually not in the classroom. I am more in a teacher coaching role to help deal with engagement and motivation during COVID. So I actually don't have students of my own, but I am at 4 different elementary schools, 2 which are more higher income and 2 which are more lower income. So it's been interesting to see the disparities in engagement, and that's kind of been my primary role since COVID hit, is to help build motivation and engagement.
Jenna, Sethi, how about you? Full disclosure, Jenna
Yes.
is the Tenseth's daughter.
Yes.
There's a lot of nepotism going on in this this adult forum today. Hi, I'm Jenna Sethi, formerly Tonseth. I'm a qualitative researcher, but I've been working at the University of Minnesota for quite a few years as an adjunct faculty in the youth studies program. I actually taught a course called Young People's Spirituality and Youth Work a couple times. And then I've also taught the sort of 101, the introduction to the major of youth studies, for almost seven or 8 years now, a long time. Yeah, COVID's affected a lot. And it's been interesting juggling, trying to figure out how to completely redo things, which I'll talk a little bit about later, as going virtual with college students, but then also having a student in elementary school and a student in junior high right now too. So I kind of feel like I got all the different ways that the pandemic can affect education.
Right, exactly. Thank you. Tony?
Well, I am I'm retired from full-time teaching, but when I moved down here to Maplewood, I was hired by the kindergarten center principal, and I'm doing a part-time teaching position, working with English language learners on the kindergarten level. When I got into that role 4 years ago, I felt like I had died and gone to teacher heaven because I loved my job so much. Well, COVID, of course, changed that. And last spring, it was very different for me to be doing the online learning. I had the whole prior few months to establish what our routine was. And so all I did was record. I didn't do any live meets with children, and got lots of affirmation from parents that because I was able just to record as if we were in the classroom, they appreciated that. Well, that of course changed in the fall. When I came back, I had not only more students, but I had half of them distance learning only and half of them were blended learning, so they were coming in. And the most huge change of all for me was being part-time. I was only delivering instruction for an hour and a half per student per week, but that changed in the fall, and it's only 30 minutes per week per student. That's a huge change.
That is huge. Well, that kind of leads us into our first question about what do you see as far as COVID affecting your students and family? I know there's been a lot of newspaper coverage over how poor a lot of the kids are just dropping out. But what do you see? Just a few words about with your students and families, how this has affected them. Barb?
Yeah, well, being an ECFE and early childhood learning, we know that young children learn best through social interaction and real experiences. And there's nothing less real than a 2D dimensional teacher screen in your home, right? So I feel, and a lot of my families in ECFE have, when we first talked about, or like when we first started this school year, we talked a lot about how we could make rather than thinking about it as distance learning, think about it as not distance learning, but like we're still social. We can be socially interactive, but we're just in our own homes. And so really rethinking like how we do our circle time with reading books and singing songs. And so that especially the social emotional learning, because that's such a huge part of early childhood development. I would say that would be the biggest effect, is that sort of that loss of social interaction with their peers.
Anybody else? Kelly?
Sure. It's interesting. I feel like every student, and this is normally the way it is also, is every student has their own experiences and how things go for them, whether it's in person or hybrid or distance learning, before the pandemic even. But I hear, a student isn't doing well in my class, and I reach out to them, and it turns out mom is a nurse, and student is taking care of 3 young other students at home, brothers and sisters, and thought she could handle it, didn't want to tell mom. She was, floundering with her own studies. And then turns out, we're at the very end of a trimester trying to potentially get these credits that, as like I said, I mentioned I teach 9th graders mainly, 9th and 10th graders, and trying to get them off on the right foot to high school. Like, this is what high school is to them as they walk in the doors, and it's not walking in the doors, although we have had some hybrid weeks. But and then some students are thriving in this. So some students love this change and they don't want to go into the building. Maybe they've been bullied or they're not comfortable there. And it's very interesting that every student, has their own take on this and experience. And I ask a lot of survey questions, how are you feeling? How's this going? What's the hardest part about distance learning or hybrid learning? And schedules are crazy. And that's one of the biggest, complaints, I think, from students is I just don't even know what to do what day. And they don't have that consistent interaction with students. Like Tony was saying, I have very little actual time with my students, even in this format, because we try to limit the required time because of all the different situations that are going on with families and each student. So it's just so different from student to student is, I guess, what my takeaway is right now.
Okay. Anyone else about that?
Yeah, and I mean, I would agree with that. And I feel like we've had a lot of families, if they are in a difficult situation where parents are not there. I work in the elementary schools, and we really had to be very creative to find ways to empower students themselves to kind of organize their schedule and know what to do, especially if they lack perhaps like executive functioning skills. So how do we build on their interests to build motivation if there's not a parent there to help them? But like she was saying, I also think some of our students who maybe find school as overstimulating, or perhaps they don't have the social skills to get along with others. I've also seen a lot of students, particularly with emotional and behavioral disorders, thrive when they're kind of getting the small group teaching at home online without students right by them where they could perhaps, pick a fight with or something. And they're actually learning more than I ever would have anticipated.
Really? Okay, thank you. Thank you. Tony?
Well, I was going to say that one of the things that I did with parents in the fall when they came into, I have to screen children to determine whether or not they need my services. And I would ask parents, how is it going for you? And it was either or. It's going just fine, we like it, or, oh, it's awful, I can't get my kid out of bed, and my kid is not interested in staying focused on the screen. And I was able to say to them, I hurt for you because you're now placed in a position where you need to do the job that I love to do, and that is be with your children. And it was enlightening, of course, to find out that it was either extreme. Some kids were doing well and some not. But then I'll tell you one experience I had with a little kindergartner. Now remember, most of these kids need some sort of adult facilitation with regard to the technology. And I was trying to do an online class live with a child who was in the same room as her sister who was doing an online class. So I'm hearing the other teacher talking to the student at the same time I'm trying to engage my student. That's crazy. But we've got some families with 5, 6 children, and how do you do that? So it's really challenging that way.
We can kind of, Jenna, were you going to say something?
I'm gonna say something shortly, about the impact on my college students. It did definitely upend a lot of their lives. Spring was I still actually remember we left before spring break, which is, mid-March. And I said, okay, you guys, be careful about, you're all going to be traveling and this COVID thing is really starting to ramp up. We need to be careful. And it was the last thing I ever said to them. It wasn't the last thing I said to them. I saw them one time online, but it was so difficult in the spring to try to synchronize the class again. We just couldn't do it. I just tried to help them get through their remaining, papers and projects and stuff, because all of a sudden I had people across a million different time zones. I had people that went back to Korea to live with their parents, so we could not meet online successfully. We did this semester, but I'll talk about that later. But I would say this semester, I probably had 10 students that had COVID out of 28 at some point during the semester, and so since it was virtual, they honestly, most of the time still came to class, but they were sick, and struggling with the symptoms of COVID. Some had mild cases, some had pretty tough cases. I think I have a lot of student athletes in my course often. And a lot of the things that happen with like their sports teams, it was really tough on their identity because they came to college to play a certain sport. They came as a hockey player, as a basketball player, as a football player. And when they couldn't do some of those things, or some of their tournaments and games and things got canceled, they were feeling pretty lost, I think, at college. So definitely impacted their identity. And a lot had to move back home to take care of, people in their family. I had a fair amount of college students that were actually moved back home just so they could help their younger siblings with online classes, their, elementary school aged sibling. So it definitely impacted college students quite a bit.
Well, we will probably talk more about that, but if we move on to how this has affected you personally in your family, trying to manage being a teacher and being at home with your kids. The second part of the question is, how do you have any ways that you could talk about how you cope? And especially, were there any spiritual or faith resources or practices that helped you through this?
Well, I'll go first. I'm in a very privileged position because I don't have young children at home. I have a part-time job. My husband is retired. It really did not affect me in a way spiritually, at least last spring, that it did this fall. And this fall, spiritually, the way it affected me was I couldn't believe how little bit of time I actually had with the students. And that was really, really difficult. But I'm in a privileged position where I just figure out what needs to be done. And also collegially, we help each other with the technology pieces that need to be worked on.
Well, you're in a privileged position, but that also probably helps you be able to give more to the students who aren't in privileged positions. So,
well, that could be the little bit of time I get with them. Yeah, I'm just hoping to give them my best. And the other thing that I don't know that we've said yet is that delivery of education changed overnight. It literally changed over the course of that week that we all went on spring break and we came back and life was totally different in how we delivered it. But the other thing is that my student clientele being as young as they are, it takes so long to get through, to take turns and learn the protocol of working online. So that's just something that I've experienced.
okay.
And I can jump.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Barb. Go ahead, Barb.
Thank you. I just wanted to share that for me, I feel like the boundaries that I had between work and family and home really got blurred for me. More so in March than I think it did this fall, but still like finding if I couldn't sleep or I was thinking about a lesson plan and it's like 10 o'clock at night, I would get up and, type away or read up on something or work on a learning packet. So that is a goal this year, not to have more firm boundaries. I've done pretty well over the Christmas break. I have team members texting me and wanting to get together and pass resources back and forth, and I'm like, no, not till we go back. I just, so I'm and I guess I feel like through that too, I kind of lost the regularity of church too. And so it was hard. I was having a hard fall too. So.
Yeah, thank you. Anybody else who wants to talk who does have younger kids? Kelly?
Sure. Yeah. It's interesting. We hear from different people about, oh, we have young kids and this is hard because of this. And we have older kids and the seniors and they're missing out on some of these big pieces of being a senior. And our kids are in 4th and 7th grade. And it's one of the ways that we coped, kind of 2 answers to this question, right? Amy and I went on walks. Like we will always remember this time of COVID as walking for miles every single afternoon or evening and talking this out. Like there was so much to talk about and to process through, and what are we going to do if the kids go back to school and we don't, or what are we going to do, more importantly, if the kids don't go back to school and we do, and how are we going to have them learn when we're both, Amy is in child, in a school district working with childcare, and that has been insane. And so we were both so busy, and we still are, and the kids are, doing their online learning in the other room, and we come in, and it's been, that's one of the silver linings of this, is we feel like we've had this amazing gift of extra time with our kids before they get too old that they don't want to hang out with us anymore. So in a way, a little blessing in disguise that we've had this time with them, and we've been able to see more about what they're learning and how they learn, and what they're like as a student, because normally they're doing this in a classroom somewhere, and now we're seeing it. So, that silver lining in there, but it's also just been very difficult. Like, we feel like we're dropping the ball in our jobs, and we feel like we're dropping the ball as a parent. And, we're not, that I feel like some people say that, oh, I'm homeschooling my kid, and you're not homeschooling your kid. You're supporting your kid, and your teachers are doing their best to, educate them, but you are helping, and you're doing a lot as a parent too. But it's been a lot. And like Barb said, yeah, those lines are blurred. And I mean, the number of times I heard my kids like, why are you working again? Can't you come and do something with us? And then it's tricky too, because you are working your 8 hours or 10 hours or 20 hours a day that you're working. But, so they don't quite understand why you won't spend more time with them when you're here together. But then, you feel like I said, you feel like kind of like you're failing at both jobs. And it's been a struggle. So again, a lot of walks and a lot of processing, Amy and I, through all of this. So we've had each other for that, which has been great. And I remember in the spring, speaking of like what has helped through with the church and spiritually, in the spring, I was having a really hard time with like, what does this virus mean and how is it going to impact us? And there were so many questions, and I mean, there still are, but I remember like not really doing well. Like my heart felt like it was, not beating quite right, and I wasn't breathing well, and I was very stressed. I get overly stressed about things, and getting those daily message prayers at noon in the spring was something that I really needed and that I really appreciated. So that was very helpful.
Great.
I'll just jump on with Kelly really quick, because we're about the same age, and we have kids about the same age. Mine are 6 and 8 instead of your age. But yeah, I would say, well, I mean, I'm in my son's bedroom, so that should tell you right now. This is my office. We're sharing at this point. And so, I mean, that's been tough. His day starts about 9:45 with his morning meeting. He goes to Emmett Williams Elementary School, but my day often started at 7:30 or 8. And so he was very gracious about it, but I had to essentially get him out of bed so I could use the one desk upstairs, because my husband Arjun uses the desk downstairs. And yeah, we've all had to have our 4 separate learning spaces. In terms of the learning online, they've done pretty well independently. And I think this fall, I feel like the middle school and the elementary school, they both have really, really amazing teachers too. Shout out to Cameron Radke at Emmett Williams, if you've ever met her. She's a master teacher and excellent, and has been just really great. So they've done that well, but I think what they really missed is, playing in the band, playing in the orchestra, skating, doing some of the stuff that they were used to. It's like the learning part they can live with online, but it is some of those activities that I think they've missed a lot. So part of what we've done this fall was to kind of like get back to church in a way. We watched the services and stuff before, but we really made it a ritual to light the Lenten candle and to read the prayers and to kind of do all that stuff. And that felt, I don't know, that felt kind of grounding this season to do that together. And that was a good coping thing, I think, for our family.
Okay, thanks. A couple questions. Janet Breyer, did you have a question?
It was actually her husband, Barry.
Oh, her husband, Barry. Hi, Barry.
Howdy. I put it in the chat. You can see it there. I'm very curious about what the panel thinks parents are going to be involved in their child's education, how that's going to change, given they've been spending so much time being so involved with their education during the pandemic.
I can speak to that a little bit. And I'm just going to give a shout out to the Generosity Committee and Prince of Peace. I was blessed with $5,000 from Rose Diesler's estate to buy books for our home learning packets, and primarily I'm working with the family literacy and the language specific team. And so we send the home learning packets that are we send materials, and it's based on what we do in our circle time, and it's based on what we talk about in parenting. And so as far as like the expectation of parent involvement, if we continue doing home learning packets, or even when we come back to in-person learning, I feel like parents will want, they are excited about the packets. They really appreciate the packets. I think they like having that higher level of involvement. And we've been really stressing and talking about how, you know, parents are their children's first and most important teacher, and now more than ever. And so I think from what I'm seeing from my immigrant and refugee families, they really, I think they are really enjoying that higher level of involvement because they have to facilitate what's happening with the packets in their home while we're doing it on our Zoom calls. So
Thanks. And that moves us to the next question. And Karen actually had asked a question about, have any of the panelists had students who've had technology limitations, like access to computers? The next question was, how has poverty and disparities affected learning and how children are learning?
I'm just going to jump in because this is a really big issue that we're seeing in ECFE. It's really just the technology piece. Okay. Having a device. Most of our families are coming to class on their smartphone, and a lot of them, if they don't have internet access, are using their data plans, and they just don't have access to internet. So we have been blessed in the district. We were able to deliver 50 iPads to families and about 100 hotspots. But definitely the technology piece. Even we were on Zoom, and then we had to switch over. We switched over to Google Meet. Just getting that to happen on a smartphone took like 2 weeks of sharing screens and texting back and forth.
How about other things besides technology, or anybody else want to jump in?
Well, I'll
Amy?
just say that our school district has been amazing. Every student has a Chromebook on the kindergarten level, and we too have delivered hotspots, and our school social worker has been working very hard to make sure that everyone gets connected. I mean, he will literally go to their homes and help them if that's needed. So we've had great support that way, but technology takes time and effort.
Right. Amy?
Yeah, I was just going to say, Anoka Hennepin has been wonderful at providing Chromebooks for every student and really providing a lot of support. With the 4 elementary schools that I support, 2 of them are, you know, lower socioeconomic status. And so we have had more problems with technology in those schools, and it's not because they weren't provided. It's more perhaps because the parents are working a lot during the day and can't support their students. So the two principals of those schools, plus the social workers go out to the homes. And I think in each school there is maybe, and I'm special education teacher, behavior specialist. So I'm just referring to the special education students. So in each school, there was maybe between 15 and 25 students, special education students that needed a lot of extra support with the parents. And we've really done everything we can. And maybe in about 5 to 10 of those cases, even that really wasn't enough. You can't have people, you can't force people to be engaged. You just do everything you can. So that's what I've seen is the biggest learning curve for a lot of the administration, is really trying to focus on what we can control and what we can't control, and how can we boost engagement and motivation really by empowering the students and focusing on the things that we do have control of.
Yeah, good. Dan, did you want to say something? Oh, you're muted.
Yes, just a couple comments on the structure of education and the problems that higher education has, and so does secondary to some extent. When we created the virtual university system in higher ed back in the middle 90s, it was obviously on a course basis because that's the structure of education. We were well prepared in the first style of learning, which is lecture. We knew in lab that there were great hurdles presented, and obviously in the third style, which is internship, and all three of these blend together in the academic major. Real quickly, bottlenecks, I'll speak quickly to the point. Bottlenecks now exist in many occupations that require extensive laboratory learning to get appropriate credit assessment, to have, for example, the nursing practicum or the teaching learning experience. And these bottlenecks will prevent students in the future from graduation. Now at the high school level, I can't speak to elementary because I've never taught or worked there. The same issues exist beyond technology because these styles of learning will not enable every child and young adult to be prepared then for higher education. So it's not just technology, it's also the structure of education which becomes a barrier. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. How about any positive kinds of learnings that you think are coming out of this? And how do you see learning possibly being changed for the future? Kelly?
So I think a lot of, and I mentioned a few things already, but I think there is surprisingly a lot of good things that are coming out of this. I feel like, as again, in the last 3 years being a teacher coach, there was a lot of times that I was pushing, gently to get more teachers to try new things, innovative things, technology things. And there's always that, we're too busy, which is totally true because I'm typically there as a teacher. Like I don't have time to learn this new tool or this new program or whatever. But we were absolutely forced to dive into some of this new learning ourselves as educators. And I think that that is going to have a benefit for years to come, that we now are very savvy at using this program. Now jump over to this. And now we've had Chromebooks and iPads in District 279 Osseo for years and years, but we have not been using them to the level that we should be, and we would hope to be using them by. And now I think we will be, because of that just absolutely being forced to do so. So I think that's one thing. And then, our district has already announced, and I think a lot of districts are doing the same thing. We will be having an online high school or online school, not just high school. We had been working on it for years to be more within the district, having our own online courses and coursework, because often if students, especially in high school, want to do more online, they were going to different online high schools. And then the public schools were losing those students and that funding and all that kind of stuff. So districts have been working on this. And again, this was the push that we need. And now we've announced that we will have an online school system within our district for the ongoing future. So that'll be a big change as well.
I would piggyback on that. Anoka Hennepin's doing the same thing.
Yeah, and St. Paul too is, as we begin to head back in February for the pre-K to grade 5, the families do still have the opportunity to do virtual school. And I think that will be for all the grades. And I wanted to just agree with Kelly too about the digital literacy piece. For, teaching ELL in ABE, digital literacy is one of the standards that we work with. And so it's exciting to work with the immigrant and refugee families and the family literacy families especially, and seeing how their digital, the growth in just the digital literacy, which we're forced to do, but and as frustrating as it feel at times, it feels very rewarding. Like the Wednesday before Christmas, my Karen translator and I worked with 2 families on a Zoom call. They had just gotten their iPads and their hotspot, didn't know what to do with them. So one at a time, we were, showing them how to go to settings on the iPad and how to connect to their hotspot, and even little things that I take for granted, like how do you type an exclamation point? How do you, because they can see the letters and the numbers, but to try to talk them through, hold the shift button and hit 1. It was really like gratifying, and yay, we got you on the internet. But just it helped me to realize like a lot of things that we just take for granted in teaching, that when you can't be physically with somebody, how that it can be stressful and hard, but you can have success, and you can that learning can happen. It just takes longer.
I think to add to that too, I think it's also nice for staff collaboration in terms of, since I go to meetings at 4 different schools, a lot of times there was so much, now I think about all the wasted travel time between schools, when I can just, I can get to 3 meetings in 2.5 hours or 4 or whatever very quickly. So I feel like we can, there is some disadvantages to rushing things too, but also I can collaborate with administrators and teachers as a team a lot more efficiently. And we did have those tools before, we just weren't forced to use them.
Exactly, and I'll piggyback on that to say, I think it's really important for me to let everyone know how hard our administration is working. We teachers are working very hard, but our administrators are spending tons of time helping us to do as simply and effectively as possible what we can do. So it's a lot of work for a lot of people.
What do you think about some of the decisions, that whole thing about, like the health and safety, about the decisions about staying home or about doing it hybrid or online? What do you think some of the administrations, of course, it's also at the state level, but what do you think they've gotten right? What do you think they've gotten wrong? Especially around, is it safe for teachers? There's a lot of teachers I know that have had problems going back. Their kids might not get sick, but they might give it to teachers, that whole issue.
Well, I can talk about that in a little bit, maybe about the positive stuff too. One thing that was maybe really different, interesting about being a professor at a university is that they gave us a choice. to decide if we wanted to teach in person, hybrid, or online before fall semester started. I'm guessing none of you probably had a choice around what you do. And I think that was helpful for some, and it really freaked out some professors too. And they just wanted a full decision for everyone. But it at least allowed me, because I already knew I knew what my classroom looked like. I knew what I do in my class, and it's extremely experiential. And you would think I would say, no way, I don't want to do this online, because it's small group discussion. It's kind of the opposite of what Dan was talking about. It's very little lecture. It's actually quite a bit of critical dialogue and putting a problem in front of the class and having them talk about it and solve it and things like that. But I knew that would be talking very closely together in a very small space. And I wasn't feeling comfortable about putting them at risk and putting myself at risk. And like I said, 10 of them in the class got it, and they weren't even coming to classes with each other. I mean, you're living in close quarters in a close environment. And so I thought, well, this is sort of like what you all were talking about, forced creativity, right? I had to be forced to be creative and have compassion too for my students. And it just really made me experiment. I had no other choice. I had to figure out things like Padlet and other sort of online platforms that allow me to have what I called like the board. And so I started a thing where I'd have the Padlet. It would tell people what was happening for the day, when things were due. Then I would share my screen, and then I'd play music in the morning. So they'd come in for the first 5 minutes, almost like they would have been a regular class. They see what's happening for the day. They hear music going in the background. They just kind of relax into it. It was the first class of the day. It was an 8:15. I had plenty of students that literally were in bed on a pillow when they joined my class, but I just wanted them to show up. I was just happy that they showed up. And what I did realize, that with a lot of intention, you can make virtual spaces very engaging and very relational and very compassionate. And my students really supported each other. When I brought some COVID resources at the end of the semester, they had more than even I had to share, and they shared them with each other. And a lot of it was mental health. A lot of it was, if you're feeling down, here, you can go to this, there's these services for you. And so they were sharing services about getting, mental health support with each other. And so I do think there were some really kind of amazingly compassionate moments that happened as well. But yeah, having that choice at the beginning of the semester and just being able to move forward and say, I'm going to do it this way was helpful for me.
Jean, there you go.
This is a very, maybe a limited question, but I'm just wondering, being so concerned about the arts and music and drama, what's happening in the schools and able to, when the kids can't get together and play their instruments or sing together, or what are the teachers, they must just be, well, everyone's kind of swirling, but Jenna, you mentioned music, and I was just wondering if any of you know what's being done in that realm.
I know Charlie's in band playing trombone, and he did that in through March and started this year. He's also doing an extracurricular jazz. So in Roseville, they have a pretty vibrant jazz program. So he did an audition, and I know he has large band practice, and then he has individual lessons. So I know, for Charlie, that is still happening.
Yeah,
At kindergarten level, we have specialists, teaching specialists, and so our kids are.
Whoop, Tony, you're muted. Yeah.
Sorry. On the kindergarten level, the children are still receiving music education and PE education online with our teaching specialists. And they, but it is different than being on an upper elementary or junior high or senior high level and already having an instrument in place. But we're still doing a lot of singing.
Yeah, I've
Yeah,
watched
they're being very creative in different ways. So like Barb was saying, you know, Jason's in jazz band and in the band, and so they have a lot of different meet times online. And the high school I work at also had, you know, just ways, again, I kind of feel like with our Christmas pageant, it was amazing, and like we were like forced to try something different and new, and it was so cool, and I loved it. The same thing happened with the choir at Osseo Senior. Is the choir director decided we're going to do something, and they had, you know, voices coming in and coming out, and like different, you know, images on the screen for their concert, you know, where they were all in their own rooms in their own homes, but they were all singing, and it was really cool. And then they added they named the concert Relics or something like that, and then they even had interviews with students about a family relic from their culture, and then they, you know, even showed it online. And I was like, I love this. This is like better than a regular concert in a way. So they've been very creative and doing their best with that, I think. And I don't know that, you know, the practice and the, you know, playing together piece is happening as much as we would need it to be in a normal year. But I think they're working hard to make it work.
Are there any moral or ethical lessons, you kind of touched on this, that have been learned in the middle of the pandemic? Are there particular teaching moments you've experienced in this regard in your work? Barb?
Yeah, I wrote down a few things. Again, it's just having that patient, and someone said compassion. I think Jenna said compassion, and I wrote that word down. And grace with technology, with both my parents and my coworkers. It's like, okay, how many Google Drive trainings do we have, right? Do we need to have? But I have to be graceful and compassionate and patient. One of the things that, a couple of other things is just school is kind of a, I don't know if it's what a lesson, but something that we talk about as a staff is now we're going into people's homes for school, right? And you know, that can make families feel comfortable or uncomfortable depending on where they are at. And that has some part, you know, that might have some cultural aspects to it as well. I know some of my Somali moms don't like to be on camera, so they are usually off. They will talk, but they don't like to have their picture on the screen. So it's just, you know, just addressing and learning what that comfort level is, or that cultural, what that cultural piece is around technology. And then a big thing that has come up for me this fall is just the boundaries with mental health. I've had 2 parents reach out to me with mental health, looking for mental health support. And so you want to be supportive. I want to be supportive as the parent educator because they know me and I have a relationship. And so, you know, I want to have that conversation back and forth, but I have to be very careful with my license because I don't have a license to, you know, I'm not a therapist. So like, how far do I go with my conversation through a text or on phone? And then where I, you know, then I have to like say, you know, recommend like, or encouraging them to speak to their primary doctor or their primary clinic. Because I don't, you know, it's a real thing. I mean, and also,
Does that mean we're near the end?
it's like, no, that was my phone. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. We are actually about near the end.
But it's just, you know, again, that professional boundary of how much help can I give because I love these families and I want them to be healthy and happy. And then when do I, you know, and that's always an ethical issue is around my licenses. Where do you cut off the boundary because I'm not licensed to be a therapist?
Thank you. Anybody else have any added issues about that or any final words, Kelly?
I think I'm on mute. Okay. My mute button's being funny. I just keep, I see things come through on Facebook. One thing that I like that I keep reading is, there are a lot of people who keep saying things like, oh, the kids are getting behind. And I think it's important to remember that they're not. They're learning things they wouldn't have learned otherwise. They're learning what they can right now, and what they're aiming towards, what our standards are for different grades are these arbitrary things that we've set over many, many years, hundreds of years, and they change all the time anyways. And we know that as educators that standards change. We're going to teach this year, and we're going to move this to over here. And there are a story that I saw on Facebook that said, I lived in a refugee camp for 4 years. I had no education. I came here and now I have a PhD and I'm doing great. Kids are going to be okay. And I think that flexibility and grace that, we need to show families and students and ourselves is one of the best things that we can remember to do.
Tony?
Yeah, I agree with you, Kelly. I think it's supporting the families and the children's resilience. And I think, I can't remember your name. I'm going to go through and find your name. Amy, you had spoke about the executive function skills. And really, those executive function skills can be practiced anywhere. You don't need to have those in the school. And, so like working memory, impulse control, and mental flexibility, those are skills that are probably, I don't want to say they're like learning your ABCs and your numbers and your colors aren't important, but it's those executive function skills that I think that really set the stage for success. And we're actually talking about executive function skills in January. That's my parent ed topic. And just talking about like how to do that at home. What does that look like for you and your family? And it doesn't necessarily have to happen in a classroom.
Tony, were you to say something?
I was going to say I do have a very clear ethical issue, and that is that when I'm doing live meets with children, and I know a child was unable to attend, I can't record the sessions because the other families can see the faces of students, and we're not allowed to do that. So I can't record a session, put it up, and allow them to come in and do the session at their own leisure. And that's a real ethical issue that creates a problem for me.
Any other last words?
I just think one big lesson out of all of this is how much the power of relationship and connection between students with one another and belonging to a group and the connection to their teacher. I feel like this whole thing has really highlighted how important those relationships are to learning, especially the SEL, the social emotional part of learning. That's the part that I'm involved in. So maybe that's just why it's on the top of my brain. But I feel like that's something that we've really been able to capitalize on, is trying to get to, I've seen a lot of teachers and students do a lot of activities to try to get to know each other a little bit better to help facilitate that learning. And I'm hoping when we go back to quote unquote normal, if there is a normal, that somehow some of those lessons that we've learned about the importance of relationship will be emphasized once again when we're all in the classroom.
I know we have to quit, but when will normal be? When are your guesses? When we'll be back?
Never.
Never?
I don't know.
I agree. There's a whole new normal that's going to be out there, and it's going to include options for people to be distance learners all their lives. I mean, it'll be a new normal.
I agree. We've talking in EE that when we go back face to face, or in person learning, that we will all continue to offer online learning opportunities, because then that way we'll be able to serve more families in Minnesota.
We could talk so much longer. I keep thinking of all the different people, like Kent and Linda. You guys moved to Texas to be teachers for your grandchildren. There's so many different people who are doing so many different ways to support each other. But I thank you everybody so much who are part of this, and we want to support teachers and we want to support students, and thank you so much. Peter, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, let's just quickly do a round of thanks for these panelists. God is certainly at work in the work that you're doing. This is such an important vocation, and what a gift that you are to the various communities that you're serving, and what a privilege it was to be invited into pieces of your stories. We're grateful for the compassion and the grace and the resilience and the ingenuity and the persistence that you all have demonstrated so much, and the colleagues that you work with. We are deeply beneficial and benefit deeply by your efforts, and we're grateful for that. And we're grateful that God has been able to work through each of you in this way, and so thank you for that. A quick plug for next Sunday for our forum. Scott Tunseth is going to be giving us a presentation rooted in the sacrament of baptism. Next Sunday's narrative lectionary is the material that leads up to Jesus' own baptism and sort of the launch of his ministry in the Gospel of Luke. And so with that, Scott's got a presentation that I will confess I had to re-record the announcements 4 times. It took me 4 takes to get the word out of my mouth properly. Thank you for titling it as such. That the presentation, Scott, is titled "Baptism: The Ancient Catechumenate and Living Wet." Now, if you want to know what catechumenate is, you'll have to come next Sunday, and that's your teaser. And you can spend all week practicing that word, catechumenate. Perhaps I need to put a little video online of me saying that over and over and over again, because that's what I had to do to get it right on tape for worship for this Sunday. So anyways, looking forward to that conversation and this initial movement into this idea of our identity being rooted in our baptismal identities, and it all kind of flows from there. So grateful for Scott's work in preparation for that, and we're looking forward to being together with you all this week. We start a new worship series next Sunday. Let's roll up our sleeves together. And there's some exciting things coming our way for the next few weeks during this season of Epiphany. The 12th day of Christmas is soon upon us, which means our Christmas season is coming to an end. The wise men are making their way into Bethlehem to find the newborn king or perhaps 2-year-old king. We're not sure how old he was, but that day of Epiphany is soon upon us and marking the conclusion of our Christmas season. So blessings to you all in this day. How about I close us with a quick word of prayer? Gracious God, we give you thanks for all the educators in our life, for those who have been good stewards of the gifts of knowledge and wisdom and understanding. Continue to make your presence known in and amongst the work that they do. Reassure them that their efforts are making profound impact on your world. Be with all students, all learners of every age. Give them patience and understanding and insight. And bless parents who as they support their young learners in their journeys, and give them equal doses of patience and wisdom and understanding. We ask all this in Jesus' name. Amen. God's peace be with you all this day. Thank you for joining us.